Josefina Learns a Lesson, a School Story, Book 2. And tonight we are reading Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Turning Blankets into Sheep. Just as Papa promised, the sky was a clear blue the next morning. Only a few gray clouds remained, and they scuttled across the horizon, as if they were ashamed, shoving against each other in their hurry to get away. Below, the ground was so wet it was shiny, reflecting the new blue sky. It was crisscrossed everywhere, with thin little rivers no bigger than trickles, trying to find their way down the hill back to the stream. Papa had come home from the village at dawn, just in time for morning prayers. As she knelt in front of the altar in the family sala, Josefina had thanked God for Papa's safe return. Now, the family was gathered in the kitchen for breakfast. Josefina was helping Clara and Carmen, the cook, make tortillas. Anna was rocking her younger boy in a cradle that swung gently from the ceiling. Francesca was grinding corn. She would put a handful of dry corn on the flat metate stone and rub back and forth with the smaller mano stone until the corn was ground into coarse flour. As the cradle swung back and forth, it made a comforting creak, creak, creak sound, which the soft, regular thud, thud, thud of the manos matched in rhythm. Papa looked tired. Tia Dolores gave him some mint tea. He sat down and took a long, grateful sip before he spoke. You all did a fine job of saving as much as you could from the garden, he said. I'm afraid the news from the village is not as good. I was in time to save the Magdalena's roof, but one whole corner of the church collapsed. Some of the villagers had not harvested yet, so their crops are lost. They were swept away by the stream when it rose over its banks. What a blessing it is that you bought our harvest in early, said Anna. We will be able to share it with the villagers who lost their crops. No one will go hungry this winter. See, said Papa, that is a blessing. He paused as if he didn't want to say what he had to say next. At last, he said sadly, but we've suffered another loss. I was told about it late last night. It seems that the shepherds were moving our sheep from the summer grazing lands in the mountains down into the winter pastures closer to the rancho. When the storm began, the shepherds took a shortcut to save time. Just as they were crossing the bottom of a deep arroyo, a flash flood came. All of a sudden, the arroyo was full of a raging torrent of water. The water came so hard and so fast that the sheep couldn't get out of its way. The shepherds risked their lives to save as many sheep as they could, but hundreds of our sheep were drowned. As if he needed to hear it again to believe it, Papa repeated, hundreds of our sheep were drowned. Anna lifted her son out of the cradle and held him close. Everyone else was still. They looked at Papa, their faces full of concern. Then Josefina went to stand by Papa's side. She put her hand on his arm, and he patted it while he stared into the fire. So many sheep killed. Josefina knew this was such a terrible disaster. How cruel the storm had been. The rancho could not survive without the sheep. They provided meat and wool for weaving and for trading. What would Papa do? Papa's voice was heavy with discouragement. The sheep are very valuable, he said. My father and grandfather built up the flocks over many years. It will take a long, long time for us to recover from this loss. He sighed. We'll just have to start over. I'll have to trade the mules I was raising. I have nothing else to trade. I'll have to use the mules to get new sheep so that we can increase our flocks again. For those of you just joining, welcome. We're reading from Josefina Learns a Lesson, a school story, book 2. And for those of you liking the live, thank you. If you aren't following me, be sure to give me a follow so you don't miss more lives. So let's continue reading. Perhaps not, said Tia Dolores. She'd been so quiet, they'd almost forgotten she was there. Now she spoke to Papa, respectfully, but firmly. Forgive me for speaking, but perhaps it won't be necessary to trade the mules. Perhaps you could use the old sheep to get new sheep. They all stared at her. Please, go on, said Papa. Tia Dolores explained. The old sheep provided you with sacks and sacks of wool when they were shared last spring, she said. Your storerooms are full of their fleece. What if we use that wool to weave as many blankets as we can? We'll keep as few as possible for our own use and trade most of the blankets to the villagers for new sheep. We can trade with the Indians at the pueblo too. Sorry, just 1 second. Show my door just blew open. We have a really bad windstorm tonight. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. We have really bad windstorm outside, so my door just flew open a little bit. Sorry. Anyway. But they all weave their own blankets, said Papa. Who would they want more? To trade to the Americanos? Answered Tia Dolores. My father told me that they are glad to trade their goods for blankets. They value blankets for their warmth and strength and beauty. I don't understand, said Francesca. Who will do all of this weaving you talk about? Tia Dolores smiled. We will, she said. You and your sisters and I. The household servants will weave and any workers on the rancho who are able. Josefina saw that Francesca wasn't pleased with this answer, and Clara and Anna looked unsure, but Papa seemed to be giving the idea grave consideration. Trading blankets for sheep, he said thoughtfully. Perhaps it will be good for both sides. Our neighbors will help us by giving us the sheep we need, and we would help them by weaving blankets so they can trade for goods that they need. Si, said Tia Dolores, simply. Anna nudged Josefina with her elbow and raised her eyebrows. None of the sisters had ever heard Papa discuss business with a woman before. He was the patron, the head of the rancho, and the head of the family. He had never discussed business with Mama, but Papa didn't seem to be offended by Tia Dolores' forwardness. Still, Josefina was not sure it was proper for Tia Dolores to have such a conversation with him. Josefina knew she and her sister should sit quietly. They all knew it wasn't their place to speak. All except Francesca, of course. But Tia Dolores, Francesca protested, I don't see how we can weave any more than we already do. We hardly have time to do our household chores as it is. We'll get up earlier, said Tia Dolores briskly, if all 4 of you help. Josefina can't help, said Francesca. She doesn't know how to weave. Anna nodded, and even Clara agreed with Francesca for once. That's true, Clara said. Mama never taught her because Josefina was too small. She's still too small to work the big loom. My servant, Teresita, weaves on a smaller loom that hangs from the ceiling, said Tia Dolores. I'm sure she'd be willing to teach Josefina to weave on one like it. And I'm sure Josefina is big enough to do it. Josefina can help. Josefina saw Papa looking at her. His smile said that he loved her, even if he wasn't sure she could be of help with the weaving. With all her heart, Josefina wanted to please Papa. She could tell that Tia Dolores' idea had caught his interest and given him a little hope. She didn't want her sister's doubts to discourage Papa or Tia Dolores, and so she spoke up with spirit. I'd like to learn to use the small loom, she said. And anyway, I can help wash and card and spin wool for the big loom. I know where to find the plants we use to make dye, to color the wool, and Mama always used to say that I was good at untangling knots. Papa laughed out loud. His laugh was a sudden, unexpected, wonderful sound. Well, he said to Tia Dolores, if all of your weavers are as eager as my little Josefina, you'll turn the wool into blankets and the blanket into sheep in no time. I think we should give your plan a try. Tia Dolores was very pleased. We will pray for God's help, she said, as we put his gifts to good use. Won't we, girls? His smile was so happy, so full of energy and encouragement, that all the sisters had to smile back and say, see, even Francesca. That very afternoon, Tia Dolores brought Josefina to Teresita. Will you teach Josefina how to weave? She asked. Teresita was working at a loom that hung near one wall and stretched from ceiling to floor. She looked at Josefina and then she smiled. Teresita's smile seemed to use her whole face because her eyes were surrounded by wrinkles of good humor. See, she said. Gracias, said Tia Dolores. You might as well begin right now. As I always say, the saints cry over lost time. She left, and Teresita watched her go with a twinkle in her eye. Josefina could tell that she and Teresita were thinking the same thing. The Tia Dolores gave the saints very little reason to cry. She never wasted time. Josefina sat down next to Teresita and watched her weave. After a little while, Josefina asked, How did you learn how to weave? Teresita's voice was unhurried as she answered, Before I came here with your Tia Dolores, I was a servant in your abuelito's house in Santa Fe, she said. But when I was a little girl, I lived with my people, the Navajos. My mama taught me to weave on a loom like this. I've never forgotten, even though I was captured by enemies of the Navajos when I was about your age and taken from my family. Josefina knew that the Navajo Indians lived in the mountains and deserts far to the west. Did you ever see your mama again? She asked Teresita. No, said Teresita. Did you miss her? Asked Josefina. Si, said Teresita. Her dark eyes met Josefina's. You and I are alike in that way, aren't we? She said. We both lost our mamas at a young age. Josefina nodded. I am sure you remember the things your mama taught you, said Teresita. Josefina nodded again. Oh, see, she said. Josefina nodded again. Oh, see, she said. My sisters and I tried very hard to remember her lessons and stories and songs. Good, said Teresita. She was quiet for a long moment. With a light touch, she ran her hand across the loom. Then she said, Here is the story my mama told me. When the world was new, Spider-Woman taught the Navajos to weave on a loom like this one. The upper crosspiece is the sky bar. The lower crosspiece is the earth bar. And the stick, which goes between the strands of yarn, is a sunbeam. I'll show you how it works. Josefina watched. The loom looked like a tall harp. Long taut strands of wool yarn connected to the sky bar to the earth bar. The sunbeam stick held the strands apart. It made space between the strands so that Teresita could weave another piece of wool through them. When she had woven the wool through all the long strands, Teresita pulled the wool gently, pushed it down into place, then turned it and wove it back in the other direction. Teresita's hands made it look easy. Josefina could not wait to try. May I do it? She asked. Teresita handed her the wool. Remember, she said, the earth, the sky, and the sun have already worked hard to provide us with this wool by growing grass for the sheep to eat. They didn't hurry their work, and neither should you. Josefina worked very slowly indeed, but even so, the row she wove was loose and bumpy. Teresita helped her take it out and do it over again. Josefina was weaving a straight row that was a pale gray color, but the part of the blanket that Teresita had woven had a lovely pattern of stripes and zigzagging lines and diamond shapes and triangles on it. The dark blue zigzags reminded Josefina of the mountains that surrounded the rancho, and the creamy white zigzags just above them looked like the snow that capped the mountains. Floating below the zigzag mountains were dark V's that looked just like the graceful wild geese Josefina saw flying across the autumn sky. And below them, Teresita had woven pale golden shapes that reminded Josefina of the cottonwood leaves that fell all around her when she went to the stream every morning. Most of the colors of the blanket were soft, deep browns, many gentle shades of gray and blue, and delicate gold and yellow. But every few rows Teresita had woven in yarn that was the fiery orange red of the harvest moon. The pattern is so pretty, said Josefina. It reminds me of our rancho. Yes, said Teresita, wrinkling her eyes in a smile. A blanket should be as beautiful as the place it comes from. She was thoughtful for a while before she said, Maybe this blanket will travel all the way to the United States. Maybe some little girl there will look at it, and then she'll know how beautiful it is here in New Mexico. Josefina liked that idea. She'll probably like the red strands the best, she said. Just as I do. They stand out from all the rest. They do, said Teresita. But every strand, dull or bright, is part of the pattern. Every strand adds to the strength and beauty of the whole blanket. See, agreed Josefina. But the red wool seems to change everything around it somehow. It makes all the colors look better. That first day, Josefina had to do her row of weaving over and over again before it was smooth and even. But Teresita was very patient, and slowly, Josefina's hands became accustomed to the feeling of the wool. When Josefina came for her next weaving lesson, Teresita had set up a loom for her to use by herself. Josefina enjoyed her weaving lessons with Teresita. It was a pleasure to weave the wool through the strands and to push the newly woven row down so that it fits snugly next to the row below it. Part of the pleasure was knowing that with each row, Josefina was adding to a blanket that would help Papa replace the sheep he'd lost. Josefina was pleased and proud to be of help to her family, and as the days went by and she learned to be a better weaver, she was pleased and proud of herself for learning something new. I may be the youngest and the smallest, but I can help, just like my sisters. She thought, I can help turn blankets into sheep. Tia Dolores was right. Sometimes, as she was weaving, Josefina smiled to herself, thinking of Tia Dolores. It seemed to Josefina that Tia Dolores was like the beautiful, bright red wool. She changed everything around her and made it better.